Now broadcasting from the Next Gen Conservative Studio in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report with Sam Whitfield.
That's new. All right, folks, welcome to the Whitfield Report, Thursday/Friday edition, which we're doing on a Friday because yesterday was Veterans Day. And usually we do the pop culture and entertainment show on Thursday. And today I have for you a new author, Mr. Eric P. Bishop, who is in the thriller genre. A lot of you have been asking me to get Jack Carr on the show, and I don't have quite enough pull to get Jack on the show yet, but Eric Bishop, I've been following his career as a writer for a while, and we actually, I think we met in the Jack Carr Facebook group. I can't remember, either that or the Vince Flynn one.
We might have one of them, yeah.
Just
call me Jack Carr Jr. That I'm okay with that title. Jack's such a great guy. You call me Jack Carr Jr., but I am not Jack Carr in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I think he might have potential to be up there, though, in my opinion. So, but anyway, so Eric, thanks for coming on the podcast first off. And how did you get into writing, just in general? What is your background? Just as a whole.
Glad to share that. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to have the book out, and I'm excited to be able to tell people a little bit about the Body Man and how the Body Man came into existence. So I started writing. I read a lot. So that's the one thing I always tell people. And I, a lot of people say it. If you want to be a good writer, if you want to write, you need to read a lot. I attribute a lot of that to my dad. My dad actually gave me my first Tom Clancy book. My dad kind of got me started in that genre, and the Clancy, which then became the Flynn books, really are what gave me the confidence that I could do this. Didn't think I could do it at their level or their caliber, but I knew I could tell stories, and I believed if I kept working on it, I could craft something similar to what they did. Wrote poetry in college. That's where I started. It's terrible stuff. I've looked at some of it within the last couple of years and shaken my head and told my kids they probably never get to see that, so they can have some respect for me. But all joking aside, that kind of got my interest in putting the written word down. And after college, I started writing actual stories. What I found was I was good at starting stories and I was terrible at finishing them. So I have something that's still on my computer here in front of me. I have a folder on there called Old Books, and under there, I think there's probably 10 to 12 folders, somewhere around that. I haven't counted them recently, but it's all just old stories. Some of them are a page long, some are 50 pages long, but they're all just old stories I started and never finished. So fast forward 2014. By that point, I had 2 kids, full-time finance job, and kind of just busy as can be. And I kind of hit that spot of realizing I wasn't really happy with life. I wasn't really happy with the direction I was going, and kind of, what do you want to do? And I just had this, not a voice, but I just had this gut feeling of, well, you've always wanted to write. You love thrillers. Why don't you actually buckle down and write a book? So I spent a while kind of researching it, what I wanted to do. And I came up with a really good character. And then I came up with about 7 books worth of high-level ideas. And then I just started the first one in June of 2014, and I finished it in September of 2014. And that was it was not The Body Man. My first book was called Vengeance. Then I wrote a book called The Zachariah Option. And then I wrote a book called The Vigilante. None of those books have sold. I actually probably shouldn't admit it, but I have never read The Vigilante, the third one. By that point, I was trying to sell the first 2, and I finished it. I finished that book with a goal of keeping it under 100,000 words, because I always had these huge books that I had to cut down a lot of words. And I finished The Vigilante, and I looked down at the bottom of the screen and it said 99,999. And I said, whew, I did it. And I never looked at the file again. One day maybe I'll open it up and get back to those books. But it was kind of an apprenticeship to get me started for the Body Man. I started the Body Man soon after I finished the third one, and I was working on some other projects, doing some novellas and stuff like that. But I was always writing at the time. But yeah, that's when I came up with the Body Man. And it was years ago. It was not just a couple of years ago. I actually finished the first draft of this book 2018, I believe is what it was. 2019 is when I had a much better book. So we're looking at 2 years before I had something resembling what's in everybody's, or hopefully everybody's hands now today. Out the book's out.
Yeah, it's on my Kindle. So
Awesome.
so what you're saying is, if I'm understanding correctly, is you wrote a series of books before you wrote the Body Man. So then
Absolutely.
what made you decide, because that's really interesting. What made you decide the Body Man is the one to publish, or I guess send to publishers, as opposed to the other books that you had written?
Rejection. So the rejection for I didn't, like I said, I didn't even look at the third book. Still haven't looked at the third book. But getting rejected on the first two I pitched. The first two I actually even went to Thriller Fest in New York City, pitched them, separate trips or separate years, and got feedback, got some positive feedback, and nobody would sign me. And the more I kind of talked with people, and then by that point, the cool thing about those experiences is I started to then grow a relationship, or at least a camaraderie with fellow authors. And some of these people were big deal authors. I know we were joking earlier talking about Jack Carr. I met Jack Carr in 2018 at Thriller Fest. There was Friday, Saturday night, whatever night it is, they have banquet right after or a happy hour after all the panels are over. And you can just go in there, grab a drink, and your favorite authors are milling around talking to each other. And I walked in there and I looked across the room and I see this bearded guy. I had not read the Terminal List yet. It had just come out, I think, a few months before that, maybe, or right around that time it had come out, maybe a couple months before. But I was like, oh, that's Jack Carr, because he's a stud. I knew who he was from social media, and we had interacted on social media, so he knew who I was. I waited my turn. I walked over there, put my hand out, Jack, Eric Bishop. And, 20 minutes later, I'm bringing Jack over to meet Brad Taylor, who I had met a few times and known socially. So I got to introduce Jack Carr to Brad Taylor. They had talked, but I don't think they had physically met. So I was like, cool. And then I just stood back and was a third awkward wheel as two operators talk. And little financial analyst me has nothing to say to these guys. They're giants when it comes to the military. But no, as I was kind of pitching those stories, one of the things I heard from a lot of people was, well, your stories have a lot of military stuff in them. And they weren't military thrillers per se, but they focused on some military characters.
Sure.
And one of the comments I heard from people is that, the military genre is really small slice of publishing. And a lot of these agents have their big dog already, use Brad Taylor as example. Brad Taylor has an agent, and Brad Taylor is part of a publishing house, and he is their go-to for military. Not that they won't hire anyone else or bring on other authors, but they've kind of have their established names, and it's hard for someone to get in there, especially if you don't have the military experience. And I didn't. So I don't remember if someone suggested, or I then said, well, maybe I should pivot. Maybe I should shift gears. And I started looking more to make them more political. And that's kind of why I went down that path. And I do honestly view those first novels as well written. From what it's been years since I've picked any of them up, really. But I know people that read them, people that weren't even friends, weren't family, that read them, said, man, these are solid books. So maybe one day I'll visit them and I'll fix them, and maybe even revisit that series. I'd like to write those. I finished 3. I'd like to finish the 7 books. It might be something I can do in the coming years on the side, or get a new contract or something like that. But I don't think they're good enough to publish as they are now. And I really believe truly that was an apprenticeship for myself. I learned a lot from other authors. I learned a lot from reading books. David Morrell, How to Be a Successful Author, Successful Novelist is a great book. I just learned a lot about the industry. and I learned a lot of my shortcomings. So each book, I think I got better. And by the time I hit The Body Man, and I can tell you the story if you're interested of how I came up with that, but by the time I hit that one, I knew it was special. I knew the concept I came up with. It wasn't arrogance. I'm far from arrogant person. But it was that confidence that I've got something unique here that I haven't seen before. And I've got a concept that I can build off, and I can go a lot of directions. That's the most common thing I've heard from people just last couple of days and months before this that have read the book. They're like, man, you can take this story so many directions. And that's what I liked about it. I wasn't living in this small little world. I've created this world that can spider web really fast. And I did that intentionally. I did that intentionally so I wouldn't be stuck with one character, one story arc, anything like that, anything that's like a formula. I wanted to create something that I could really pivot a lot of different directions. And part of that was just to keep it fresh for an audience and also make it fun for me, because my goal in writing books, I want Sam, I want you to enjoy my book. I really do. But at the end of the day, I don't write the book for you. I do write the book of, do I entertain myself? Because I've read so much in this genre. I know if I can like it, there's a good chance other people will like it. And so that's my first goal. Can I make, and I do it. I don't know how writers don't like what they do. I've heard writers say, oh, I read my book and I hate it, or I don't want to ever read that book again. Now, I've read my book a lot in the last year, so I probably won't read it much anymore. Maybe I'll read it to my kids a little bit here and there, edit, a few parts. But man, I'm proud of that book. And every time I've read it, I just read it a couple weeks ago for how many times it's been this year. And I literally sent a message to my publisher. I sent a message to a couple of friends, and I said, damn, this is a good book. And again, it wasn't arrogance. I just enjoyed the story. And I had even forgot some parts because I jumped into so many things over this year, even with reading it a bunch of times. I kind of like, oh, I forgot that part. All right. Oh man, that's right. That's still in there. It hasn't been edited out. And I really enjoyed it. And I don't know. I think that's a testament to putting together a good story. And again, that's not necessarily on, good job, Eric. It's just, man, I crafted something good. The fact that people are enjoying it is icing on the cake. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to have this thing out. I'm looking forward to what people have to say. I'm sure some people are going to hate it. I got thick skin. I'll nicely reply or ignore them. And if I reply, I'll say, I didn't really write it for you, but I'm sorry you didn't like it. You probably won't like the next one either.
Have you been accused of like copycatting anyone or like stealing anybody's
Not
stuff?
yet. If there's someone out there that's got a similar thing, it's definitely not intentional. But no, I've never been accused of copying anything. No.
And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you would plagiarize anything, but like one thing that I get like a lot is there are some people who will be like, well, your podcast is just a clone of, Rogan's podcast, or you're a clone of, Rush Limbaugh, or choose your pick, and you hear, I imagine that, you hear that a lot, in the author world. I remember I read.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember I read some, I read an Amazon review of The Terminalist early on, where someone was like, this Jack Carr guy is just a copy of Robert Ludlum in the Born Identity. And and I've read the actual Born Identity, and I'm like,
yeah. I've got it sitting down there. It's the bottom of my shelf. I've got all of his originals. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's a lot. That is a long book to get through. But also, I'm not. How can you say that he's like copying Robert Ludlum? I'm not seeing.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing. But you get that. I guess.
I totally get that. And I'll tell you what, I will fully admit, I'm always concerned when I'm writing something. Boy, is this an original concept? Or because I've read so many freaking books. Is my subconscious remembering something that Ludlum wrote, Clancy wrote, Carr wrote, whoever, Brad Meltzer. Yeah, that's definitely, I will say that plays on my brain of, am I being completely original? Because to some extent, really, if we went down that rabbit hole and analyzed it, everyone's copying something,
Sure.
some form of what their story is. I mean, how many centuries ago did people write stories, and what happens? The boy gets the girl, or someone goes through hard times, and at the end, it's all just rainbows and unicorns. So there's always some formulas and some concepts there that are probably repeated ad nauseum in many, many novels. And it's hard to be unique. It's hard to put a spin. To me, I thought that's what was kind of cool. Was I hadn't read anything that did what I did with the White House and the Secret Service and all that. And if there is something, I've never read it, so it's not something I've copied. But I think I put a unique spin on something, and because there's a lot, and I have the FBI. I have FBI agents in here. I was fortunate to. I'm not part of the FBI. I've never been a government employee, but I was fortunate to take an FBI class. I got nominated by a fellow writer who I'm indebted to. He's in my acknowledgments for doing it for me. But I was able to take the FBI Citizens Academy class, which was a 10-week class just in the evenings after work. But it was a 10-week class with the FBI. And I learned a ton. Now, the funny part of that is I took the class 6 months after I finished the book. So I had already written the book. And it took a while to get into the class. And I didn't want to stop writing the book. So I finished it. But the class opened up my eyes to things. And I was able to go back and fix things. And I'm sure a real, true FBI agent might read this, and I might get a nasty gram from them about how, oh my goodness, you don't know how investigations work, or you don't know how this works. And I'm sure they're 100% correct, because I've never been an agent. I've researched it,
Right.
but I don't have that pedigree. I don't have that background. But I hope the way I word it, the average person connects with the story, and they don't maybe get stuck on the details. I think I got as many details right as I could. But from what I've heard so far from people is they really believe it's true, first of all. And actually, my FBI agents have gotten really high praise. I had just people in the last couple of days that have started to get the book have been like, please tell me you're taking Eli and Kat and putting them in the next book. Please tell me that these characters aren't just a one-off. So that's really one of the biggest compliments I can get as a writer, is if people believe those characters and enjoy them. Yeah, because I do. I think of them as real people. I mean, I love telling their stories, and they have a story. So
yeah, I mean, I've done some small, not novellas that are self-published, and yeah, I mean, that is one thing that, just from my personal experience, you have to make your characters believable for you. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You can half-ass all that all you want, but it's not going to be, if you can't believe your own character. And the other thing is, I've read conflicting things on this, and this is another thing I want to ask you. How much of your personality is injected into each one of your characters? I'm always curious to know, because some authors are like, none of my characters are like me, or no, the characters are all me in some way.
Sure. So, I would stick with the latter on that. Probably the characters all have a little bit of me, and it's probably not an intentional thing. Like, well, I'm trying to give one character my humility, or I'm trying to give one character my sarcasm. I think as a writer, at least for me, that I inject a lot of my personal stories. So for me, what's fun is to put people's names in the book. First of all, I enjoy that. I normally make sure they're okay with it first, although I sometimes do it with some deceased friends and relatives. They don't get a say in that one anymore. But I like to put numbers in there. Anytime there's a number in my book, for the most part, it means something. And I'm probably the only one that knows what that number means. And I probably won't tell anybody what that ever means. It might be something stupid like a house number I used to own, or whatever. I have a couple that are more important ones than that I've kind of stuck in there as an Easter egg. Actually, the biggest number thing on this one that has meant the most, and it's in my acknowledgments. The book is dedicated to my mom, first of all. My mom.
I read that this morning.
Yeah, so she had me. She was a single mom, and I'm gonna not get emotional on this one, but my mom was my rock. My mom was my support system. I'm here because of my mom. Everyone's here because of their mom.
Oh yeah.
But my mom's been my biggest, cheerleader, and not everyone gets that story in life, or not, or that situation in life where their moms support them, or I'll talk to writers sometimes. They'll say, my family doesn't read my books. My wife won't read my book. My mom and dad don't read my book, and I'm like, my mom saw the first draft of every book I've ever done, and my mom, all the bad words and nudie scenes or whatever. Guess what? My mom saw it. It was embarrassing. Probably, it's like, Mom, don't read that chapter. But no, she's been such a support system to me. And, I've got 2 kids. So when I was kind of thinking through the concept a while back, I didn't have to question him, because my kids even asked me, well, who's the book dedicated to? And I said, well, it's dedicated to BB. That's what they call my mom. I said, BB, that's my mom. And they were both enthusiastic about that, of course. But my grandmother, underneath my mom, it's a memorial to my grandmother. So my grandmother passed away in 2010. The book came out on on Veterans Day, which I was really careful about. The publisher had asked me for a November publishing date, told me I could pick it. My birthday's on the 7th. I thought if I picked that, would be a cool present, but it would kind of be seen as vain. Okay, your debut novel is going to come out on your birthday. Is that what kind of person you are? And it would have been cool, but immediately I thought of my grandmother, and I didn't even think of Veterans Day. Like I had to process it for a few minutes, and I said, well, I want to honor my grandmother. My grandmother was born November 11th, 1917. And then as I processed that, I'm like, oh crap, that's right, that is Veterans Day. And so, Jack Carr, I texted Jack Carr and said, hey, do you think there's any problem with me coming out with a book? And I told him why. And he said, no, as long as you're not, using veterans to try to sell books, or using that publication date in a way that's inappropriate. No. And a bunch of I reached out to about 4 or 5 authors that are veterans. I just wanted their take, and every single one was like, do it. You're going to honor veterans by doing it. And I said, well, yes, I want to honor veterans, but I'm really honoring my grandmother. So a long story short, to say at the end of the book, I needed, there's an oil platform in the story without giving anything away. And I did a lot of research on oil platforms, and there really is a lot of oil platforms in the Gulf of Mexico, and they really are sometimes for very nefarious purposes. But I needed a name for the oil platform, and I started looking at how they name them and all that. And a lot of them have numbers and names. And it struck me, my grandmother, I won't say where she lived, but the town she grew up in, or where she lived, not where she grew up, sorry, where I grew up, that area, but where she lived at the end of her life, her address was 84 Pike Street. And so when I had to give a name to that oil platform, I named it Pike 84, reversed it for her. She'll never know it. Hopefully she's up above looking down and knows it. But that was something that anytime I'll read that story, or someone will read it and they'll be like, oh, cool name for the oil platform. I'll be like, that was for my grandmother. That was a way to honor her, put an address in there that means something to me. It might only mean something to me, but it'll make me smile and think of her every time I read it. So that's some of the fun stuff of being able to just having this book out is fun. This is a fulfillment of 7 years of hard work and 4 books and lots of novellas and other started books. But getting to have those little things in there that I might only know about, it's pretty cool. It's really cool.
You have a very cool cover there. Obviously, the folks listening to this on the podcast on Spotify won't be able to see it, but I encourage you guys to go look up the cover of this, because it's pretty cool. The YouTube folks can see it, but
yeah, I can definitely check it out. It's cool too because the master's name is on here. Don Bentley gave me a blurb, and my publisher was able to get him to use that blurb on the cover. And Don Bentley now writes for Tom Clancy, found the family.
Yeah.
So I get, I have a blurb on there that's got Tom Clancy's name on the bottom as well. And that means a lot to me. As someone that grew up reading Tom Clancy, it's pretty cool. It's just with the book launching yesterday, I have several big name authors that have been super supportive. Brad Meltzer being one of them. Brad Meltzer put something very kind on social media for me. He messaged me privately and congratulated me and mentioned and said a few things. That never gets old. Interacting with your favorite authors and getting positive feedback from them and support from them is pretty darn cool. That doesn't do it justice, but it's pretty darn cool. So
yeah,
to even have Clancy's name on my cover, It means a lot. And for me, this whole process has showed as a lesson for others, I hope, and definitely a lesson for my kids, because we're talking about them about it last night. We went out to dinner to celebrate the book coming out, and I probably beat them over the head with it. But me sitting here talking to you, me having that book sitting up there, shows you one thing: never quit. And I've said that 50 times in the last 2 weeks with media interviews and other things. And I'm sure I'm a broken record, but most people that start writing a book never finish it. A huge percentage of people that start writing a book never will finish a book. And what's sad is they can finish a book. It's not an ability issue. It's maybe a motivation issue. Maybe it's being lazy. I mean, there's always 100 excuses not to do something. But what I've been trying to tell people, especially as I've been doing media for this book, is the only reason I'm sitting right here, the only reason that cover is sitting there and that book is there, is because I didn't quit. I'm not some special person. I did not craft the best story ever told, although I think it's pretty damn good. But I didn't quit. I stuck with something. I had a goal, and I busted my ass to get to the end and have that goal accomplished. I didn't know if it was going to get published. I didn't know if I'd be sitting here talking to Sam Whitfield, 3 years after I finished the book. But I didn't quit. I persevered and I hustled. And that's not me saying, look how great I am. That's me telling other people, if you want to do something, stick to it. At least finish it, especially for books.
Yeah.
Finish the book, because it's a baseball analogy would be, you miss every hit or miss every ball you don't swing at. If you don't swing at any ball, you're never going to hit anything. Same thing with writing a book. Finish the book. It might not be a great book. You might not get the book published. Nobody might read your book. But you know what? You'll have, hopefully, the internal gratitude and joy to yourself that you started something and you finished it. Because if you're going to do it, complete it. I don't care what it is, whether it's a book, writing music, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what it is. Stick with it, complete it. And I hope people find fulfillment from that, even if it doesn't make it, because maybe it will make it. Maybe you will craft something that someone's going to say is amazing. And who knows what direction you might take your life. People are always looking at everything, and our society is so horrible about Hollywood and celebrities and sports athletes. And Jeff Bezos,
Yeah.
I want to be this person and that person. Well, you are who you are. And the only thing you can do is improve who you are if you don't like your situation in life. So get off your butt and improve where you are. Stop complaining. Are you going to be the next LeBron James? Guess what? Probably not. But maybe you can play basketball. Maybe you can do something, and maybe you can achieve success. You will absolutely fail if you quit, though.
Sure. One thing I am curious about specifically, because you do bring up the good point about finishing the book and all that, which I think is important too.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. But when I first started talking to you, I remember I wasn't the one who asked this either. Because self-publishing has become kind of a big thing in the last few years, and
Absolutely.
I remember asking why you weren't self-publishing. Sure. And so I don't want to repeat the answer, and maybe it's changed a bit, but what was your did you ever consider self-publishing, or what was your whole kind of?
So I don't remember our conversation.
What was that process like? Well, I don't either. So
sure.
Don't worry.
I've never seriously considered it. I've been told to do it. I've been told to do it by successful authors, honestly. They're like, especially with those first couple of books, as I was kind of hawking the Body Man and even getting in the process of the Body Man, they're like, why don't you clean up, do a quick and dirty on the first couple of books and throw them out there. So, throw them out online, see what happens, see if you get some traction. Maybe you'll hit with one of those books. So first of all, I don't think self-publishing is any less of you being an author than a published author through a conventional publisher. I'm actually with a smaller publisher. I'm not with one of the big fours. I had a hell of a time trying to get an agent, and I sent 93, 92 queries for the Body Man, and I had a lot of interest. Nobody ever signed me for the Body Man. And I'd have some people being like, man, this is a great book. And I'm like, okay, we'll sign it. They're like, political thrillers aren't doing that good. And it's got DC in there and stuff's going on with Trump, blah, blah, blah. And nobody would touch it. And I had authors read the book and they're like, damn, this is a good book. And I'm like, no one will touch me. And they're like, then they're wrong. And so that's part of why I went with a smaller publisher. I didn't have as many hoops to jump through. And there's pros and cons with that. But self-publishing, the reason I did not self-publish and wasn't really interested in self-publishing is you are everything. Of course, you can hire people out. You can hire someone, Forrest Poseidon did an absolute kick-ass cover on this book. You can hire someone to do a cover for you. And, there's a pretty vast price range on that. And there's also normally a quality range. You can hire a professional editor, which I actually did. I hired a professional editor before I went through, even got Forrest Poseidon. I did an editor before I started between 2 rounds of agents. I hired someone. And I think that's what got me eventually with Forrest Poseidon is I had a very polished manuscript. It wasn't perfect. I had gone in and made changes after the edit was done by the professional editor, and I probably jacked things up because I'm not an editor. I will fully admit that. But yeah, I didn't want to do all those pieces. I'd rather sit there and write a book and then show up a week before pub date and come out and do these fun interviews and be like, hey, the Body Man's great. And then go back in my, my world and travel and do all kinds of fun stuff and write and, avoid all the rest of it. But it's not the reality anymore. And I think if you got a big contract, maybe you can have that life, but I can't. So I didn't want to go down that path of having to do everything. But I do, like I said, just to complete that thought of, I do believe that there are some self-published authors that I'm friends with, that I know that write books that compete with anyone that's on the bestseller list. And those authors cannot get an agent to sign them, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But that's the nature of the business, unfortunately. So what's your option? For them, they decided to self-publish. I applaud them and I'll support the heck out of them for doing it. Other people self-publish because it's a really easy way to say you're a published author.
Sure.
Anyone can self. I could have self-published in the last week. I could have gone before I got my book out with Forrest Poseidon with my launch. I could have been a published author a week ago and uploaded one of my early books that I finished with warts and all. I'm a published author. I mean, in some ways, what does it matter? I've got my book in my hand. I've got amazing feelings of what's happened the last couple of days. But you do have to be introspective and think, what are you doing it for? For me, I want a career. For me, I want not just the next book. I want 4 or 5 books down the road. I've got some of those planned. I've got several in other stages. So I want to build a following. I want to build people that don't just like one book I did, that they're going to like all the books I did. So that's the thought. And but yeah, self-publishing, traditional publishing, I think they both have their merits and they both do have their shortcomings as well.
It's crazy to me that those agents were rejecting you based on the fact that political thrillers don't sell, quote unquote. At least that's what they were saying, because every time I go on Amazon, or every time maybe it's just because that's what I tend to read. I mean, that's pretty much all I read, other than like books I've had to read for college. But for me, I mean, I'm a thrill guy through and through, especially with Audible. So to me, it's like, it's insane that political thrillers aren't selling, because I mean, shoot, everyone,
And Sam, the person that did this, they could have been lying out of their teeth, just blowing me off and saying something. And they had a full manuscript and they read it for a while, so I wouldn't think so. But so I will step that back, because I do know a lot of agents. I had agents that congratulated me yesterday on Twitter. Agents that rejected the Body Man, still congratulated me and said, "Good job, we're proud of you."
That's good, at least.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, I have a good. Some people despise agents, and I'm not one of them. I think agents have a really tough job. Years ago, maybe it's not the best thing to say, but I was told the best description for what an agent does is their job is to keep the crazy people away from the publishers, because there's a lot of people that write that are strange people, I guess, and they need that buffer zone so the publisher doesn't get inundated. So they have this thing called an agent. But I have a lot of respect for agents. Some the really good agents, they might get 100, people coming at them every week or day. I don't even know what the numbers are now. I don't remember them, but they have to weed through a lot of crap to find it, to find that one diamond. And unfortunately, they probably overturn a lot of diamonds in the process. I know they do, because I know people that haven't made it through the process that are diamonds. But they have a very, very difficult job. So I have a lot of respect for agents. So it's tough. It's a brutal business. I write because I'm supposed to write. I'm meant to write. I have stories in my head that have to come out. They give me joy. It makes me happy that people like my stories. But if I was a writer because I was trying to pay my bills, or I was trying to be rich, or I was trying to fill in the gap, I'd be crazy, because this is a horrible business. Now, for someone that gets a 7-figure deal, or someone that gets, all that, it's probably a great business. But, the average writer has a full-time job, or at least a part-time job. The average writer that gets to quit their job gets to do it like after 4 to 6 books that are successful, not just 4 to 6 books that sold 500 copies that sold really well. You're still not quitting your day job for most people, unless they have, a spouse that makes really good money and they can just stay home and write full time. So, I wrote the first 4 books I wrote, mainly, I have family, and mainly I wrote 6 nights a week from 10 to 12. The first book wasn't like that. In the first book, I can only say is I didn't know what I was doing, which was good. I was blissfully ignorant. But I physically got myself sick, because I would put the kids to bed, kiss my kids goodnight. My wife would go to sleep. I'd sit down at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I would write until 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I wrote that first book. I started it June 26th, and I finished it September 19th. I might have those dates a little off, but, in the better part of 3 months plus, I finished 115,000 word book. And one night I wrote 7,000 words. It was just like it was a monster night, and I was so psyched. I couldn't fall asleep. So it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm watching Seinfeld episodes, so I'll fall asleep. So by the end of that process, I was so pleased with what I did, and I was physically sick. So when the time came not that long later to start book 2 in that series, I knew I had to train myself to do something different, because I was sick. It wasn't a sickness mental, but I was physically making myself sick, because I wasn't sleeping enough, because I didn't then sleep in the morning, because I had a day job and I had to perform. I had to function. I had kids. So the pattern I fell in for book 2, 3, 4, and the other things I've written, and I'm not in that pattern now because I'm marketing, and I need to get back in this pattern, and I will soon. Hopefully once the Body Man is on good feet and selling well. But I try to write from 10 to 12. That's kind of my window. And for some people that's horrible. They want to write in the morning. For me, I get a little tired after work, have some dinner. I kind of get my second wind, and that's where my brain is popping. That's where everything's connecting for me. So I try to write that, 6 nights a week, 10 to 12. Is my goal, is what I try to do. And now it's different. Now in the last year, my life had a lot of life situations change in the last year. It's been an interesting year. Now I'm more apt to, if I'm writing on the weekends, or writing if I'm somewhere, if I'm traveling, I'll spend a couple hours just sitting in a coffee shop or whatever. But you got to find a pattern. You got to find what works for you, because what works for me doesn't work for the next writer. So
And what do you, just writer to writer, what do you use to write in general? I'm assuming you have a laptop of some kind.
Yeah, and I don't use a MacBook. I'm one of probably the few writers that don't. MacBooks are okay. most of the time I want to take my iPhone and bash it against the wall because I hate it. And I used to have a Galaxy and I think I didn't like that one. So it's probably not Apple's fault. It's probably my stupidity. But yeah, I just write, what's my computer now? That's horrible. I don't even know. Lenovo. Yeah, I got a Lenovo now. I think I had an HP before that. And I might've had a Compaq at one point. They last me about 2-3 years. I mainly just use them for writing and then of course talking with you. I don't, my daughter uses them to watch Netflix or Disney Plus, after school. And I just use Microsoft Word. I know there's a lot of different options for people to work. For me, Word has always, I'm probably just because I'm comfortable with it. I've used it since college, in the earlier versions of it, because I'm kind of old, I guess now. But Word works for me though. I'm really good. I'm very fanatical about backing stuff up. So I have obviously the hard drive at the computer. I have an external hard drive I keep in a fireproof safe that I frequently will back up the books. I have a thumb drive that stays in my wallet, and I email myself files every like night or two that I'm writing.
Oof.
As I've heard way too many horror stories of writers say, "Oh my God, I lost 20,000 words," and I'm like, "Yeah, that ain't gonna happen to me. I might lose words in an hour of writing, but knock on wood, it's still never happened to me that I've lost anything of substance." So far, and it better not change. I'm gonna back
Yeah.
everything up when we get off this call tonight. Be like, crap, I need to back everything up again. When's the last time I did it?
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the same with podcasts. I mean, I the reason I ask is like I do have a Mac myself. But you also hear like a bunch of writers using these things like Scrivener and
Yep.
like Stories and whatnot, which I use more for like I've used for formatting
Okay.
stuff because some of those are easy, but I generally like I tend to write all my stuff, especially for college, like in just Word, and then formatting it later on in some of those
Gotcha.
other
Yeah,
other programs.
I know it, and I never really talked to him about it. I know Jack Carr with maybe the fourth book, third book. He went to Scrivener for one of the books, and I want to say though, he's not told me this, but I think in an interview, because I watch his interviews. He's such a fascinating person to learn from, and to just absorb. I want to say he's back to using just a regular, if it's Word or whatever, but a regular Word program. I don't think he's using Scrivener for the book, at least the current book.
What
Uh,
is what is he like in person specifically, if I may ask?
Oh, sure.
Because
No, like I said, I went up and introduced myself, and the second time, I've only spent time with him in New York at the conference. I've never seen him outside of that. But the second time I saw him at the conference, he was actually flying back from Africa, and he didn't get in until Saturday morning. And I think I texted him that morning to say something, and he's like, "Hey, do you know where I'm supposed to be? I just landed at the airport. I'm on my way to the shower, a hotel. Where am I supposed to be?" And I was doing security, which was not as glamorous as it might sound. I was on the security team for the Thriller Fest, and I had my schedule with me. I said, "Well, yeah, I know where." I said, "I'll meet you and I'll take you where you got to go." Thanks, buddy. And then I think I got him to where he needed to go, and he was just like, "I said, you need anything?" Yeah, let's be Jack Carr's lackey because Jack's a stud. Because I need coffee. And I said, "I know you want honey in that." "Yes, I do." So I think I went up to the banquet hall. They had already taken down the coffee for the morning. And I was like, "I ain't coming back without a coffee. That's Jack Carr, and he carries knives." So there was a Starbucks in the bottom floor of the Hyatt. So I went down to Starbucks, got a coffee. I said, "You guys got honey?" And they like looked at me like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I need a thing of honey." Um,
I
so
I've always taken my coffee with honey as well, and I've always gotten crap for I've always gotten crap for it. Like, what are you, a woman or something? And I'm like, well, one of the top Navy SEALs in the country takes his
exactly.
coffee.
I like my coffee with cream and sugar. And if anyone wants to make fun of that and say you don't drink black coffee, I'm like, I don't like nasty coffee. I like it to taste good. So, and I like even
Yeah.
flavored coffee. I have Hawaiian coffee, macadamia, vanilla macadamia and cooked coffee that I brew sometimes. But yeah, Jack's an interesting guy. He's fortunate. In the last time we got together, I'm trying to think, what was that? I was 19. I sat in on a session with him. I went and sat with him. He didn't come sit with me. I went and sat with him. Stephen Hunter was being interviewed, Bob Lee Swagger fame. So Stephen Hunter's a very well-known author. And Jack was a huge fan of Stephen, and I don't believe he had ever met him up until that day. And so there was hundreds of people in the ballroom. They're interviewing Stephen, and I sat next to Jack Carr, who's idolizes Stephen Hunter, and I couldn't help but to watch him watch Stephen. And so if you're around Jack for any bit of time and you kind of observe him, I don't know if he'll ever hear this or not, and he'll chuckle at this, but he operates at a different level. For 20 years, he was the tip of the spear. He's the thing I think is amazing about him is the fact that as a young person, I think he said 7 in some of the interviews I've seen, at the age of 7, I think he knew what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to write books, and he knew he wanted to basically be a SEAL. And maybe it wasn't 7, but I know it was an early age where and then he just focused on doing that. And again, I think that's the trademark of a successful person, is you figure out what you want and how do you accomplish that goal. And that transcends anything. That transcends me telling people don't quit being an author. That transcends being a Navy SEAL. But so much of it is mental. And I know Jack has said that in interviews. I know he's talked about that. And I've been to, and I've never been in the military, but I've been to Coronado, and I've seen the training that goes on there as a civilian, just walking on the beach and seeing these guys come by with the big poles and all that.
Yeah.
And I've seen interviews with Jack where he's talked about it. And he said, guys would let that bell get in their head and they think about, am I going to ring that bell? And he's, and I won't paraphrase exactly paraphrasing what he was saying is basically like, he was never going to ring that bell. There was no way he'd ring that bell. What do I have to do to not ring that bell? And he would just take one task at a time. I think some people would look at it, Hell Week and all the stuff, and look at where they were going to go next. He would just take it as one block. Okay, I got to get to lunch, or I got to get to this. And you put all your energy into doing that. And I mean, that's a mark of a successful person.
The thing about him that has always struck me is he does not seem like a celebrity at all. In fact, in everything I've seen him in, and this is kind of one of the things, I don't know if you can speak to this, but he actually almost seems uncomfortable with the idea of maybe being a public figure or being a celebrity. Maybe not uncomfortable, but he doesn't really. You can tell with like Stephen King. Like Stephen King is used to now being like a celebrity. He's used to being a celebrity. And same, I think, with Tom Clancy later in his life. Maybe Jack, I just don't really see that in him. Like he seems to be the type that would be perfectly happy to just be the average guy at like the local Best Buy or something that you're gonna run in.
That's interesting. I probably have a different take on that, or on him, but probably because to some degree I do interact with him and have knowledge of him. And again, from what I know from him and just interacting with him, and a lot of it is just from seeing interviews with him. I've not had that many conversations with him, but he's a driven person. He knows what he wants. He knew he wanted to write books. He's very, he's very adaptable. And again, that's the sign of not just a successful person, but that's a sign of someone that can get something accomplished, is he can adapt. Okay. And I'm sure he learned that from his military training, but okay, I'm told to get to this point. Well, I get to this point and it's blocked. Well, what do I do? Some people would turn around and go back. Hell no. They're going to go over that wall. They're going to go around. They're going to blast through. Adaption is one of those things. And I think you have to do that, just circling it back to writing. I've learned a lot of lessons through this process. Just the last couple of months, I've learned a lot of lessons. I had someone message me earlier just talking about how good the launch went. And they're, who's your publicist? Who's your marketing team? Who's that? And, well, how'd you learn all this stuff? I learned from other people. And I've also learned I have to adapt. If this isn't working, okay, I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
You just don't want to make a fool of yourself, of course, which I probably do from time to time. But yeah, you just kind of learn to roll with it. And this process, the publishing process, the writing process, you kind of learn what doesn't work. And then you just have to find a way around it, or you have to reevaluate your goals or what you're trying to accomplish. But it's been a huge learning curve. And I think, back to someone like Jack, I think he's a master at that. I don't think he has any aspirations to do, people always, I've seen interviews where people say, hey, you gotta do politics. And he's just like, no, because that's getting popular. There's a lot of military guys now that are actually running for office.
Yeah.
And I don't see him doing that from just, not that he's told me, just what he said in interviews. I don't see him, and I don't know why you'd want to.
Yeah,
That's
no.
not a knock at any of these guys that are running. We need good people to run. And I think the reason why good people haven't run for so long is because how nasty politics is, and which is part of why I wanted to tell this story. I'm telling a story, but I'm probably injecting serious beliefs I have into that story of how do I think Washington works? How do I think the puppet masters pull the strings? And
Which
which
I
is
mean,
fun.
this is somewhat of a political show usually. So I am kind of curious with the body and kind of diving into that. I don't want to get into spoilers or anything. So what is kind of the premise of your
Yeah.
story,
So
I
let me tell you
guess?
how it came about, because that's normally what I'll end up telling people, and that kind of stirred the conversation. So back 5 years now, I really should know that, especially since I'm being interviewed. Many moons ago, I was probably 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I was doing a cleaning job one night. I had finished a different book, and I was kind of coming up with a new concept. I was still working on stuff. I think I was editing a book at the time, and I wanted a new story. So I had a 9 to 5 job, had a family of 4 to support. I had a Friday night cleaning job at an office that you'd go in there, take 2.5, 3 hours. And it was literally vacuuming, cleaning bathrooms, dusting, mindless work, which was kind of cool in a way because it let me have no distractions, no kids, no daddy this. And I love my kids unconditionally, but I had time to myself to think.
Sure.
It was so mind-numbingly boring. So one night I walk in, turn the alarm off, and I want an idea for a new book. It wasn't a voice in my head, anything weird like that. I'm not one of those crazy people the agents are supposed to keep away from publishers. But I had this thought run through my brain.
I might be. So, hey, you're okay to say anything.
That's no problem. But so I had this thought run through my brain of there's always someone who knows where the bodies are buried. And immediately I thought to myself, man, I don't want to tell a mafia story. I'm not going there. But I kind of answered my own question. Well, who would know where the bodies were buried? And I immediately, the term the body man, those 3 words came in my head. And I realized I heard those terms not from me creating them. I had seen a news story about President Obama. He had a gentleman that worked for him named Reggie Love. I'm actually going to try to get a copy of this book into Reggie's hands. He's a real guy. And the media dubbed Reggie the body man. Like I've told others in other interviews, I never really looked into what Reggie's role was exactly. I don't know what his official title was in the White House. He was just dubbed the body man.
I can tell you some of the conspiracy theories about Reggie Love.
I know there's tons, and I've looked at a few of them, but what I understand it to be, or understood it to be factually, was Reggie was the body man's guy to get him whatever he needed. Hold his BlackBerry, carry his smokes, need cash. Reggie pays for stuff. He's there. He's a body man. He's right there with the president. He gets the president what he needs. And I thought about that. And then I thought very quickly, well, that would be a really stupid story to tell. That's going to be really boring. Even if the president does some things hanky, how am I going to tell a story about a guy that's an administrative assistant, maybe? But then my brain, which is fairly clever, said, well, what if there was a role in the Secret Service? And what if the Secret Service independently called this person the body man? What if their job was not to protect the president? What if their job was to protect the office of the president? And then my next thought was, well, what if the body man had to protect the office from the office holder, him or herself? Which was not necessarily where the story was going, but I fleshed out the concept of what this role did. So the role has two parts. Your job, if the president does something they shouldn't do that's going to sully the name of the office, your job is to clean it up. You clean up whatever mess the president made. However, the controversial maybe side of this that's really getting explored with book 2 and book 3 right now, because I have got book 3 a little bit started and the concept very high level, even though 2 is nowhere near done. The body man actually has the authority to step in and prevent the president from doing something, which opens up a big can of worms. So you have a person within the White House that you could view has more power than the president, and they're unelected. There's no accountability. What the hell is going to happen with this? So it's a real fun concept that you can take a lot of different directions.
The thing that I like about it is it doesn't seem that far-fetched anymore.
No,
that's the crazy.
Yeah,
that's the crazy thing.
I've had a lot of people say, "Is it real? Do you know this?" And all I'll tell people is, truth is stranger than fiction.
Oh, yes.
Truth is stranger than fiction. So, is there really a body man? Does he really do what I describe in the book? I'll never tell.
Interesting.
It could be because my life would be taken away from me if I revealed what I actually know.
Well, so
there could be someone in the room with me right now. So
yeah, well,
I got my get out of free jail card. I've got proof that I'm part of the club. So I'm covered. So.
Well, you may be one of the most interesting people I've had on the podcast. Certainly this year.
Cool.
But just
in
total overall. And the other thing too, and again, I just started reading the book, but so far you haven't named the body man or given him a name yet. He's just called the body man.
It's called the body man. Yeah, that was not always like that in the narrative. So earlier drafts, the body man was named a lot earlier. I kind of did that for multiple reasons, but the most simplistic way to say why I did that was I wanted to create intrigue. I didn't want to have a name and say, oh, the body man is named Eric. Oh, that doesn't sound as clever. But I decided not to make him the body man the entire book. Like even the body man's name is revealed. And in the second book, I kind of waver back and forth. And again, it hasn't gone through editorial. I haven't finished it. I know where I'm going with it. I've got the ending done or in my head, mapped out. And I know some of the middle, but I'm still diving towards the middle. Yeah, I kind of like the intrigue fact of it that you didn't know the body man. Even it's a really cool name. It's still just a name. But the term the body man, it's cool. I created something cool, which is really fun to be able to do. But what I want to say about the role too that I didn't talk about before is one person can't be there because the body man has to be with the president. You can't protect the office and be sitting in San Francisco or Detroit or Hawaii. If the president's screwing up or doing stuff, you got to have eyes and ears on the president at all times, pretty much, or have a way of monitoring them. So the body man role is not just one person. The body man is a person, but there's always an apprentice. So you basically have the person that has the experience, and then you have someone right behind them that's in the off hours, basically, that's going to step in. Because what occurs with this role is this isn't a role for life. This is a role, and I don't really clarify this exactly, but the role has a set expiration date. At the end of that expiration date, you are basically removed from the role nicely, and you are given a very generous severance package, and you are sent elsewhere in the world with one instruction or two instructions. Don't ever come back to the United States, and don't you ever reveal what you know. Those are your two rules. If someone gets you, if someone's going to try to get that information out of you, every body man has a way of ending their own life. And that's what they're supposed to do. You die, your secrets die with you. So the body man is retired. The apprentice steps up and becomes the body man, and a new apprentice is basically assigned. In the start of this book, first chapter, body man is kidnapped.
Yeah.
And that's not giving it away, but the body man is kidnapped. So it's about finding the body man. That was another thing that people had given me grief for, of like, well, the body man's not in every chapter. It's like, well, no, the story is about finding the body man and really the intrigue of who is this person. Because the apprentice then has some issues occur. So I really tried to throw the story on its head in here. And the second story is not going to have as much of that going on, but everything else is getting thrown on its head in book 2. And really it's going global. It's going a lot more crazy things. And I think when people get to the end, they're going to be like, holy shit. Is the
body man your main character even, would you say? Or
no, that's the crazy part. And that's the part that I did have I had one in particular, author I really, really respect, a very successful author who, I don't know if they read the whole book early on, because it was rough when I gave them a copy, but their feedback was, and it was more because I wasn't getting an agent with an earlier draft. They said, well, maybe you need to just do a complete rewrite. And they were, one of the ones that said, why don't you just tell it straight from the body man's perspective? Well, once you dig in and once people read in the book and they see what's happened in the story, I think they'll understand. My thought was, I don't think I could make a great story just following the body man, considering where the body man is through most of the narrative. And I didn't want it to be that way. Again, I write for myself. I liked the idea of the story being, who is this person, and making it very mysterious, while at the same time having these 2 FBI agents who are the protagonists in my mind, trying to figure out A, who is the body man, and B, where is the body man? And that's what carries a lot of the story. And Eli and Kat are my FBI agents. So you have I don't really give his age, but you have a seasoned FBI agent kind of in the middle to later part of his career. Nobody wants to work with him. Eli can be a jerk and doesn't like partners. And here he gets this case pop up of a missing person. His supervisor basically says, hey, bring the new girl. Kat's fresh out of Quantico. Bring her. She needs to get her feet wet. She's sitting on the complaint desk right now. Show her what investigation's like. So you stick these very 2 unlikely people together and they carry the story. And the great thing about them, though, is, and what I really liked about her character, and I can't wait to explore it further with other novels, is she's not this little flower that comes out of the academy and kowtows to this senior agent. This girl's tough. This girl's tough as nails. Whatever Eli throws at her, she throws right back at him and adds a little more for good measure.
You're kind of doing the seasoned cop versus the budding rookie.
Absolutely. I grew up in the 80s. Let's see, what was grew up in the 80s. Formative years was the 80s, and the buddy cop things were big. So I know those in the back of my mind of having those relationships. And there's a lot you can explore with that. So I kind of take that, but I give a twist to it. And there's I've gotten some very good compliments that, these weren't these one-dimensional characters that started here and ended the same spot 444 pages later, however many pages the book is. But they changed, they evolved, their relationship changed for good and bad. And so, and I think that's what you should do as a storyteller. At the end of the day, your job is to keep those people turning the next page. That's another compliment that I had been given early on, is every chapter ended with people saying, okay, I want to see what's next. And I know for me, not as a writer, but as a fan, because I do read, not as much as I used to, but just because of time and all my writing. And but when I read something, man, I want to get to an end of a chapter and I don't want to put that book down. If I have a reason to put that book down, then I might put it down. And that's one thing that's changed over the years for me. If I was given a book by someone, or I bought a book, even if it was a crappy book, and there's a lot of crappy books out there that sell a lot of copies, I'd read the whole book. I bought the book, I'm going to read it. Man, I got no problem now taking a book after 2 chapters and saying, whatever, didn't interest me, put it down, give it away, stick it on the shelf, never look at it again. I won't think twice about it. Probably because I'm getting a little bit older. Time's precious. I have stories myself to tell. I don't want to read a 400-page book, put it down and be like, damn, I just wasted 7 hours or 6 hours or however long it takes to read a book of my life. I want to put that book down and be like, that was really cool. This person knocked it out of the park. And I want to feel that every single time. So as an author, that's my job. Every time I write a chapter, every time I write a book, I have to make sure I'm not giving them a reason to put that book down, just like I'm doing when I'm reading someone else's book.
When you write, do you write from a, I guess, I don't know if this is the correct term, but cinematic perspective?
Yes,
and other,
I see those scenes in my head. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
So
it's a movie in my head. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of done the same thing, and most writers, I would assume, you would think most writers do operate that way, but
I think it's pretty common. Yeah.
But I know some that don't, for whatever reason. Have you, and I know that you're probably nowhere near this, but have you ever like pictured what this would be like as a movie?
So I have, and I've had this question this week. I've done a few interviews. So I will answer it, but I will answer it also with saying I do not have anyone specific in mind. When I write these and I think of these, I do create the characters in my head, how I see them.
Sure.
Not always their faces. Sometimes not. It's kind of weird in a way. But they're never anything like, Cat is not Gal Gadot. The Body Man is not whatever. George Clooney. I don't even know how old's George Clooney now. I don't know, but probably part of that is I do watch movies. Probably tonight after I get done with you. This has been a blessing of a week, but it's been a really long week. I think I slept 4 hours. I don't know. Last night I have a 9-to-5 job. Even Kyle Mills even messaged me and said, dude, you didn't take today off work. No, I worked my job yesterday, even with the book coming out. Because I didn't have like a lot of stuff lined up. I had an interview in the morning on the radio, and I didn't have anything in the evening. I had my kids last night. I don't always have my kids. So with having my kids, I wanted to make sure that it was just about family. We went out to a fancy dinner, and I sat down finally at 11 o'clock last night and started to go through Twitter. So Twitter's kind of my main social media platform that I use, but it's also where I probably get the most feedback, basically. So
same.
I've got something beeping here. Sorry, I've got a beep in the other computer.
Oh, no
Can we
problem.
pause for a second?
Sure. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back. So Eric, you were saying about social media and just how that whole process has been going.
So last night, by the time I got the kids to bed, we had a really great dinner out, one of my favorite restaurants. Kids had a great meal. We had a great server. It was just one of those really fun nights just with my kids. So I got to my joy of it was having my kids there with me last night just to celebrate the book. So finally, I think at 11 o'clock last night, I sat down. And Twitter only, like, once you get like 20 likes or tweets or any of that, it just says 20 plus, at least on my phone. And again, I might be an idiot. So I didn't know how many I had, but I had a couple fairly big name authors message me and be like, dude, you're like blowing up Twitter. You're everywhere on Twitter. And I said, yeah, probably going to take me a while, because I just made a promise to myself, not to promise anyone else, but I said, I'm going to respond to every stinking message I get on Twitter. I'm going to do it as quick as I can, but I'm going to reply, and I'm just not going to just reply, thank you.
Good luck.
No, I did. So I started at Sam at 11 last night, and I finished at 2. It took me 3 hours of sitting on the couch, not taking a break, not stopping. Some tweets took a little longer to reply to because they might have been to Jack Carr or Kyle Mills or some big name authors, but I got a lot of kind responses from a lot of big name authors, which was completely humbling. Not name dropping. I'm a fan of these people. I don't say, well, I'm friends with this person, I'm friends with that person. I'm a fan of these authors, and I learn a lot from them. And if I can interact with them and learn something from them, That's why I want to learn. I want to be a better writer. I want to be a better communicator. But yeah, it took me 3 hours. I have no idea how many responses I've applied to. I would say hundreds, likely. But I was going to tell everyone thank you, and every response I gave was 100% from the heart, because I don't take this for granted.
No.
Not everyone gets to have a cool book launch like I had with all the people congratulating them, and I don't deserve it, in my opinion, but I got it, and I'm grateful and humbled by it. So I'm going to tell everyone, and that's something that you see from some authors, Jack, and we don't want to focus this interview on Jack Carr, but that was always the thing that amazed me about him, especially earlier in his career, is he would respond to everything. If you sent him something on Twitter and said, Jack, good job doing this, you get a thank you, or you're right, or thumbs up.
Oh yeah. I have to tell you, I bought one of the Jack Carr baseball caps. It's out in my mudroom.
I got one in my bedroom.
But yeah,
I trick-or-treated with mine this year. I got one.
But yeah, I think you and I have the same one. I bought that thing probably the week before the 4th before the 4th of July. It came on the 4th of July, so I wore it for Independence Day. tweeted it out, put it on Instagram. Wasn't expecting anything. I got some likes from some friends and from some other people in the podcasting sphere, but apparently Jack Carr mentioned me a couple of times, like featuring in the apparel thing on his Instagram. And I was not expecting,
and that's pretty darn
cool at all. I mean, I'm like, wow, he's taking part of his time out of his holiday, to reply to that. So no, that's awesome. I mean, and I think what you're doing is smart with that, because I mean,
and it's not a marketing gimmick. It's nothing like that. I see how these authors treat their fans, and Brad Meltzer was the first one I saw do it. And I know Jack Carr does it because I know Jack. I want to treat the fans the way they feel they should be treated. And I mean, with Jack, that might change. And I'm not speaking for Jack because I've never asked him this and I don't know this, but Jack is a big deal right now in publishing.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of people that want Jack's time and energy. They want to message him and tweet him, and if they've got his phone number, they might want to text him. He gets a lot thrown on him, and I think that's going to jump up exponentially next year whenever it is the Chris Pratt series comes out. So he's probably going to reach a point where he's going to be more untouchable. But from what I know about him, and again, I'm not a close personal friend and spent lots of time with Jack, but I do know him. I do know his character, just from the times I've spent with him and the interactions I've had with him. I know what the guy's made of. I can say that with some level of confidence. If you don't get to contact him much in the next few years, it's not going to be for lack of him wanting to say thank you. It's just that he won't have enough time. I mean, I don't know how many messages I had last night. I don't know how many, but I sat there and this isn't a woe is me. I enjoyed every moment of it. And I'm proud to say that was an honor to sit there for 3 hours, but I sat there for 3 hours last night and responded to tweets. I'm sure that's not an uncommon occurrence for him over the last couple of years, all the messages he's gotten, because he has a lot more fans. He sells a hell of a lot of books. You can't have the bandwidth and the time, because he also has a family. He has other responsibilities. He can't just sit there for 12 hours a day replying to people's tweets and texts and instant messages and Instagram and Facebook and all that. It's just not possible. So I know he probably has to cherry pick it now, and it'll probably get even more next year when he becomes, Jack Carr superstar with Chris Pratt playing James Reese. But it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. It really couldn't happen to a nicer guy. And I'm a fan of his. I'm fortunate that I have interaction with him, limited interaction with him that other people don't get. But I'm a fan. I'm a fan of his writing. I'm a fan of how he treats people. I'm a fan of how he interacts with people. And I'm a believer in karma. I think good things happen to good people. Not everyone in the industry has a great reputation because of how they treat people. He's one that has everything I've ever heard, a stellar reputation, and everything I've interacted with. He's humble, he's grateful, and he's like The Rock. He's also the hardest working man in the room. You're not going to outwork Jack Carr. No way, no how.
Well, and you, if I may say, have very much the same, type of personality. You seem very humble. You seem very hardworking.
I don't deserve this. I would be the first one to admit that.
And I mean, I can tell that you were passionate about writing the book and that you wrote this for you. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I think there are so many authors out there. I'm not gonna name anyone specific, but I think it's easy to get sucked into once your book hits or once anything hits, whether it be whether if you're a music producer or an artist or a model or what have you. I think it becomes so easy to get sucked into this and into the fame of it all and
getting the big head. Well, I'll tell you a quick story, and this is why Eric Bishop won't have a big head. My book came out last night, and that was, again, I've said it several times, I'm 7 years of hard working, 4 books to get a book published. I bled, sweat, cried, tears, all this to be a published author. No big head, no I deserve it, no nothing like that. If I started to have one, though, don't worry. I have a built-in popping mechanism, and it's called The Love of My Life, my daughter. I was going to read to her my book. I think it was Wednesday night. So I'm sorry, it wasn't last night on release night. It was Wednesday night. Book hadn't come out. I have an advanced copy. I've got a copy on my Kindle. And I said, honey, you want me to read my book to you? Because it's not a kid's book by any stretch, but there's stretches in there. There's no bad words,
sure,
shootings or anything. There's dialogue. And I thought, and I've read to my son. My son's been like, cool, Dad, this is awesome. I'm proud of you. And my son's 14. My daughter's 10. So we're laying in bed. I pull out the Kindle. She's like, yeah, Daddy, read to me. Yeah, I read about a page and a half. And I looked over. I said, what do you think? She goes, I don't like it very much. And I was just like, ooh, stabbed to the heart. But it wasn't really a stab to the heart. I laughed and I was like, there we go. I want to be humble. I'll just read a book to my daughter and I'll realize I'm not a big deal. The 10-year-old doesn't care what the hell you just wrote. You're just a regular guy that some people might like. But guess what? Your own flesh and blood you love unconditionally. Yeah, you're not that big.
What does your son think of the book? I'm curious.
He's not read it, so I've only read parts of it to him. They'll both get copies. My daughter actually informed me. I don't have my hardbacks yet. I'll get them at some point from the publisher. But my daughter informed me that she gets the first signed copy, and I'm like, well, you're not really going to read the book. Saying my son shouldn't be able to read it either. He's only 14. Giving them, they don't like me crying. My son was actually here. I got a book this afternoon and it just worked out time-wise that my son was with me for a little bit, not in school for a few minutes. And I would get ready to drive him to where he had to go, and the postal person pulled up, and they had a package, and I knew what the package was. It was a copy of the book. I had not touched a physical copy yet. I had only had a digital copy and a printed off copy that I worked on edits and stuff like that. But so I said, well, let's film this. Let's make it quick. I've been having a lot of videos this week. People are probably sick of seeing Eric Bishop. Sorry, folks, you probably see me a few more times, but I'm trying to be sincere with the process. And I'm so humbled. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And sometimes it's just easier for me to just put the phone on the stand, shoot a quick video, tell people what's going on instead of typing 10 tweets or something like that. So
yeah,
I told my son, let's open it together. And he said, I'll film it. Yeah, I said, awesome. Let's keep it 30 seconds. I didn't think about what I was going to say. I just said, I'm going to open it. I'm going to talk. I got 10 seconds into it and I wanted to cry. And he don't like that. He gets upset if you cry in front of him. And I had to probably in the video, if you watch it, it's on my Twitter feed, it's on Facebook, Instagram. I had to kind of I had to gut check for a second and be like, okay, I can't start crying. I don't care if I'm crying on film, but I don't want to cry in front of my son. And real men cry, but it bothers him. I don't want to see you cry, Dad.
I don't, yeah, and I don't think that's bad either. I think
Oh no,
especially
neither do I.
I think especially for what you've done, and since this has been like a
Yeah.
long dream of yours. I mean, a couple of years ago, I actually back when I was in high school, back when I first started podcasting, actually,
Mhm.
I was a big fan of Andrew Breitbart, who has since
Yeah,
passed,
absolutely. No, we is. Yeah.
and at the time, Breitbart's protege was a little known columnist named Ben Shapiro.
Oh, I
So
wonder
I
who that might be.
so I reached out to Ben Shapiro and emailed him, and I was a senior in high school at the time, and I was just like, I emailed him, and I think I said something like, I wanted to interview Andrew on my show, but I never got the chance because
Mhm.
he passed on. Would you be able to come on? I
Mhm.
sent the email. Didn't expect that I would ever get a reply from him at all, but
Right.
he responded, within like 5 minutes or something, and so we set the thing up, and he did my show probably later that month. Um, it's been probably I did that interview in like late 2012. It was before Obama's second reelection.
Okay.
So it's been almost, I think, like 9 years now. I mean, I still get people being like, "Wait, how do you manage to interview Ben Shapiro?" And I'm like, "Well, Ben Shapiro was
It
not
wasn't Ben Shapiro. It was
Shapiro yet."
Ben Shapiro, not Ben Shapiro.
So, that was very humbling to me even back
Yeah.
then, because I'm like, wow, he took the time to be on my show, and he didn't, I was just a senior in high school. I really didn't have an audience at the time.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so, you know, I've always been very humble, with my audience, and, just with guests, and
Sure.
and so that's why I'm grateful whenever I have people like you who are on. You might not be a big author now, but
We'll
I
see.
think the book has potential. Um, you know, Maybe someday people will be asking, "Oh, how'd you manage to get Eric Bishop
Then you can be
on the
like, he
show?"
just talks to anybody. I mean, geez. No kidding.
So, or vice versa. You know,
Absolutely.
um,
Well, it's a great way it's a great medium to share your story. You can connect with people. Back years ago, you didn't have that ability to connect with your audience. It's a double-edged sword.
yeah,
Um, the biggest issue, I guess I'd say, not podcasts, but I'd say with like the media, social media, all that in general. And I'm a huge consumer of it. I look at it, I post on it. So you could say, part of the problem. It's a great way to interact with people. And that's the only reason I know Jack Carr. It's the only reason I interact with Brad Meltzer, Kyle Mills, and I don't want to just say big names, David Darling, Joe Goldberg, JT Patton, authors that aren't as well known maybe. The only reason I know any of them is because we met through basically social media. So
yeah,
social media has helped open up, from a writer's perspective, a plethora of contacts and an amazing support system. That's the one thing I can say about the writing community. There's always the outliers. You got people that, honestly, frankly, are jerks, and there's not very many of them. I haven't interacted with very many of them, but as a general rule, um, these are a group of amazing, amazing individuals. They're talented. They're willing to help each other. Most of them have a very little ego, that at least comes out. Maybe they hide it well, but and I mentioned this in another interview, might have been last week or earlier this week. I think part of that is because, as a general rule, most people don't make it as a writer, or don't even get into it very heavily when they're younger. So by the time people have gotten to the point where they've written a book, they might have gone through a couple careers even. So they've kind of had a maturity level develop. They've had life experiences. I couldn't have written The Body Man 10 or 15 years ago. I could have maybe written an okay concept of it, but I needed experiences. I needed to be jaded, maybe. I needed to be more sarcastic. I needed to be more clever. I needed to learn a lot of things that only comes with life experiences. And I'm a blessed person in many ways. One of them is I've gotten to travel, not as much international as I wanted. I have been out of the country multiple times, but my bucket list for international travel has not got knocked off as much recently, and I got a lot of places I like to go. But within the U.S., I've been to most. I just knocked off 2 states recently. So I'm at 45 now, and I wanted to be at 50 when I was 30, and I'm 45. So I'm 45 years old. I've been to 45 states. I wanted to be at 50, 15
Not
years
bad.
ago. But no, I mean, and that's exactly true. Anytime I kind of get down at myself and go, man, you haven't hit the 50 no, I go, you know how many people haven't been to 5 or 10 states? You've been to 45 states. And I've not just been to 45 states, and half of those states I landed at an airport. I've spent time in most of those states, and sometimes I've spent a lot of time in some of those states. I've lived in, how many states have I lived in? 1, 2, 3, 7, 6, 6. I think 6. I literally just got a new North Carolina license a couple of weeks ago. I should know how many states I lived in, but I moved across the state line. I didn't move very far this time, but I'd already lived in North Carolina before. So I've done North Carolina a couple times. I've done South Carolina a couple times. I've done the Western states, several of them. I've done the Northern states. But I've been able to travel a bunch, and that's first of all, it's a blessing. First of all, it's a blessing I've been able to do that. But second of all, that opens things up, and that's one of those things that I always try to push people. Should I go to the beach or should I take my kids to Europe? Pre-COVID, COVID's jacked up everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not being negative about it, but COVID's made everything more complicated.
Sure. Yeah.
You can't just travel. You can't just say, I'm going to get on a plane in 6 months and go to Paris, or I'm going to go here. You might not be able to. Are you vaccinated? Do you have a negative, PCR test or whatever it might be? Are you masked? But pre-COVID days, I tell people, man, take your kids to Europe. Don't take them to Disney World. Disney World's great. I've been 3 times. I've never taken my kids to Disney World. I haven't taken them to Europe either. So I'm, preaching at the choir here, but man, go out and explore. I've been to Europe. I've not traveled as much as I want, but man, I think when you go see other places, it opens your mind. I think when you see other cultures, it's beneficial for you. And you maybe don't take for granted as much what you do in your regular life. Because, we're talking here, Sam, and we both you live in Florida?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So we both live in southeastern region of the United States. I'm in North Carolina right now. I've traveled
love North Carolina.
North Carolina's I'm right in the foothills of the mountains. I was up in the mountains twice yesterday for 2 different things I had to do. So I was up and down the mountain. I've driven that. My poor Honda hates going up that mountain probably. And I drive up that mountain. I used to do it every day for work. But yeah, it's a beautiful part of the country. And that's just it. We live in a beautiful place. We live in a country that, for all its warts, for all the negative things I could ramble on for hours about politics and all that, how many people want for nothing? How many? This is a higher version, obviously. You don't have to see my gut. How many meals have I missed in my life? I've missed 0 meals in my life. Maybe when I was sick or maybe whatever. But have I ever been in a position in life where I couldn't have a meal, even if it was a meager meal, where my mom never was able to feed me when it was just me and my mom? No, I've never been in a situation. And I mean, I've actually brought that up to my kids before. Go look at worldwide stats, and they're going to be correct in my head right now, but look at worldwide stats of how many people don't have running water, don't have a toilet. It's not 100 million people. It's 1 billion plus people that live in what we would say is abject poverty. Well, there is poverty in the United States. Don't get me wrong. There's homelessness. There's a lot of blights that we need to continue to work on, and our communities need to help others with. But the average person in the United States is doing pretty damn good. And I know I take it for granted, and I'll be glad to tell most people, you probably take it for granted too.
Oh yeah, I definitely know I take some of the stuff for granted.
I'll go out and grab a pizza when we get done tonight. I got the ability to have money in my pocket, drive out, grab a pizza, come back, maybe crack open a beer, watch a little television, and go to sleep because I only slept 4 hours last night, and have a good night's sleep. And I have heat, I have central air when I need it, I have lights, I have a big screen television. I have all these comforts that, for the history of mankind, nobody had. Nobody, you were worried animals were going to get you. You were worried a rival tribe was going to come over and, kill your family, and you're going to have to battle them. That's not a concern you typically have to have anymore for majority of people, especially in our country. So, we live in a very, very fortunate time in history.
Right.
And I think if you travel, circling back to what we were talking about, if you travel and if you see how other people live, maybe you come back and you go, okay, I can probably be a little more grateful. I can probably be a little more humble, because we should be that way.
I think one of the things that has happened, though, I was talking with a friend about this last night, is I think, and it happens on both sides, but I think the media and the talking heads on both sides are so, we live in a non-stop news cycle where it's
24 hours.
Yeah, where it's 24 hours, not, and
Absolutely.
it's never good news either, or it's
Rarely.
it's rarely good
I agree
news.
completely.
You're always hearing out one bad thing or another. And I think that is something, I haven't read too far into the book yet. I just finished chapter 3, I think it is, but I can kind of tell that if you're going where I think you're going in the bottom, and you do kind of touch on some of the political divisiveness in the book.
It gets
And
worse it gets worse in book 2, but yes, it absolutely. But yeah, no, the media cycle and we live in an age of technology, which is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
We live in an age where everyone's got sound bites. Everyone's got 3 or 4 words they want to get out and get to everybody. Yeah, it's hard to have kids in this age. My son frequently will say, he's 14. He frequently is like, Dad, you had it made, man. You grew up in the 80s. Because I'd be like, yeah, they'd ask how it does. It's like, yeah, on the weekends you'd go over a friend's house and you'd sleep over. In the mornings you'd get up on Saturday morning, you'd watch cartoons, jump on your bike. I would drive down the road with my friends. We would go to the corner store and get some candy and stuff. And I was told to be home by dinner. My mom wasn't sitting in the front yard watching us going, where are they going? Where are they? No, we were gone for 8 hours. I wouldn't let my kids go out the front door and be gone for 8 hours now. Is the world that much worse? And you can make an argument probably that it is, yes, but or is the fact that when a kid gets kidnapped, my phone buzzes and I get an Amber Alert. And I'm totally drawing a blank. The name of the girl in Florida that was found dead out west.
Oh, Gabby Petito.
Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry to not remember that name, but that was a huge media story for everywhere, every day, all these stories. And I'm not making light of that fact that was a media story, or what that girl's family went through is hell on earth. But during that time period with that girl missing and then being, found dead, how many American kids were missing? How many are missing right now? The numbers are astronomical, but one person got all the news cycle. And
yeah,
it's crazy how things happen and the manipulation that takes place.
and I it's funny that you mentioned that, because I brought that up on a live stream podcast that I did, and I got flack because people were saying, oh, you don't care about, you're making light of, and I'm like, no, I'm not making light of the fact that she was kidnapped. I just find it interesting that there are probably hundreds of, kids that go missing per year.
I think I mentioned earlier, I took the FBI Citizens Academy class, which was,
yes, you did,
an amazing experience. I wish everyone could take it. You have to be recommended by someone else that's graduated. I could recommend people, honestly, possibly, if it was offered in their area. But I wish more people took it. And one of the sessions we had was about the sex trade, which I've looked into for a book, one that I've started. I've looked into a little bit for an earlier book. Not something I want to look into, especially with having a daughter, with having young kids. But if you look into that trade, that's one of the things that it's not in the Body Man, but that's one of the things I found that the oil platforms in the Gulf have been used for is human trafficking.
Yeah.
Bringing people up from South America. And guess where they process them? Right down the road, about 2 hours and 45 minutes, called Atlanta, Georgia, which I was in 2 weeks ago. You read these things, and I don't know, as a dad, as someone with a belief system, a conscience, you're like, dear God, is this really occurring? Are guys really doing this to these girls, and people are really selling their kids and all this other stuff? And man, you get down that rabbit hole. Yeah, you want to write a book called The Vigilante, like I did with book 3, which wasn't about that, but it had a little aspect. But it's crazy. It's crazy what happens. And the FBI class, I mean, they talked about the stings they would do for these guys that would be they were pedophiles, looking for young girls or young boys. And man, you're taking that class and you're just getting so blanking mad at other guys, mad at humanity. That's like, oh man, I don't know. That's I think everyone has those issues that really, really bother them. I hope everyone has an issue that they would be bothered by pedophilia and child molesters and all that. But I mean, that's the one where you don't want Eric Bishop to become the president of the United States or anyone with a lot of power, because you ain't gonna want the rules that I would probably put in place, because there ain't 3 strikes and you're out. There's 1 strike, and guess what? You won't be doing that.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, hey, listen, if you want to start a presidential campaign based on that, I'll run your campaign.
I do not want to be the president of the United States. I'll be the body. I'll be the body man, but I would not want to be the president of the United States. Not from what I know about the role. No,
well, I can tell you, just even working with the college Republicans for the brief period, and I mean, I never formally worked for them, but I ran a few clubs, and so I mean, I met a few political people. Some are great, but others are just like, yeah, you realize that both sides of the aisle, people are just really duplicitous. And
yeah,
I mean, I guess I would consider more like right conservative in my political views, but at the same time, I'm not clear cut to the right either. And this is the big problem we have, is with the political parties, it's either you believe in everything we believe or you're out.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, most Americans just aren't like that. And most of the people in politics aren't like that either, even though they would have you believe that. And so, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say I'm disenfranchised with politics, but I mean, in some ways I am. And, it was to the point where I was kind of like, well, I'm just going to step back and kind of reformat the podcast the way I want to. So I did that like five years ago, because I'm like, it's one thing to be talking. It's one thing to just be a talking head. It's another thing to actually have a show and have a personality. So
right. No, I completely agree. So yeah, it's and I try not to get into politics very much. And the reason I don't now, I've like, even Twitter, at one point I was a little more political. You piss someone off no matter what.
Oh,
Whether
yeah.
you're conservative, the Democrats hate you. If you're a Democrat, the Republicans hate you. And honestly, as I've gotten older, I've become in the middle. I really see both sides. I see it as one snake with 2 heads a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the fun part of writing these books, because you can put your beliefs in it, or you can put your spin on it. But the fun part about it for me is you can do whatever you want to these jokers. You can do whatever you want to the president of the United States, to the vice president, speaker of the House. I've got a lot of fun things going on in book 2. you can kind of take your angst out on these fake characters and feel like, hey, if I was in charge, or if I was this guy, this is what I could do. So you get to have a lot of fun with it in a fictional standpoint.
Sure, yeah.
I've read a lot of authors that have, or heard a lot of interviews with authors said that it's like, it's great. You can kill people you don't like in a book, and not killing anyone. You're not advocating killing anyone, but you can let your stress out on, hey, this character is going to meet this pedophile is going to have a really bad day, and it'll be his last day he has a bad day.
There are definitely some scenes, especially in the Terminal List, where I was kind of like, how did this get past the publishing?
I'm pretty sure in interviews Jack said they really made almost little to no changes on his book. I think well, I mean, the one scene with the wrapping around the tree, if you're going with that one, that's graphic. Well, in the which was it? What am I thinking of now? Savage Son. Yeah, Savage Son. He has a scene later in the book with the tomahawk.
Yeah.
And so I asked him about that scene. I was fortunate enough to be in contact with him at times, and I asked him about that. And I think he said it in some interviews too. But he told me directly that he actually recreated that scene, or that scene was kind of planned out with someone that he knew that was very well skilled in that type of weapon. And so it was a completely like choreographed scene that he then put into the book with the tomahawk. And I can't speak for Jack, but I think he probably gets to live out some of his fantasies of what he might like to do and how the justice he'd like to see done. You kind of work out your issues in written form, and people enjoy that kind of stuff too. People, want to, I think deep down, most people want to see the bad guy get what's coming to them and the good guy to be able to shine. And we all know that's not life. But it is nice to be able to live in a world where that can happen at times, even if it is not reality. Sure.
I also think, though, to have characters with complexity and with flaws Absolutely. As well is very compelling. Like there's I think I can certainly say that I see aspects myself in James Reese, sure. Jack Carr's main character. The funny thing of it is, and again, I might be giving Eric Bishop a big head here, but I actually saw you as James Reese initially when I was casting him in my head, not Chris Pratt.
Interesting. I don't think Amazon Prime would have gone for that, but because I'm much more of a nobody. I'm not a James Reese or a Chris Pratt. I will take that. But yeah, I'm not a.
Well, I thought that you were an operator at first when I first.
And I've always been careful about that. I've probably because a lot of the stuff I put on there are military. I had an office previously. I'm in a different house. I just moved. But one of my earlier offices had a lot of flags. And I have people directly say, well, you served. And so I've always been trying to be very, very open with people and say I did not serve. I've got a flag right behind me, which that one came from Afghanistan. The one over my shoulder came from Iraq. The one up there actually was, you can't see that one with the screen, but there's one above higher up that flag actually flew on the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor on September 11th. It was not September 11th, 2001. I think it was 2009. So my shout out is I have a buddy that's retired now. I still don't say his name or anything like that. I don't put pictures of him online. I never have. Knew him from college. I finished college. He said, screw this. And he dropped out of college. And he had been in college because his mom wanted him to go to college. And he didn't want to go to college. So he dropped out 3 years in and he joined the Army. And he wanted to be in the Army. It's what he always wanted to do. And he served for 20 years. And saw a lot of tours, a lot of combat, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Lebanon, Kosovo. And the cool thing about it was on most of the times he did a tour, he brought me back a flag. And especially when I had my last office, I don't have them up here in this new house yet. I'm going to find a spot for them. They're in storage right now. But I have a flag that was flying, according to him. I think sometimes he might have told me some stories, but I have a flag that was flying when we invaded Iraq. And he came in from Jordan. So I have a flag that was literally hanging on the border, Jordan and Iraq, and I have the Iraqi flag from there. I have a flag from one of his fifth group teams when he was over there that they made two flags. I have one of them that they would hang off the back of their truck. So I have those flags mean a lot. Every now and then he'd ping me and be like, "How are my flags?" And I'd be like, "Bitch, those are my flags. You gave them to me. What are you talking about?" So I have a lot of connections, and some other folks that I'm very good friends with too served. And it's probably why I'm drawn to the Jack Carr, authors and some of the other authors that are military, because I didn't serve, but I just have an immense amount of respect for people that put on a uniform and, willingly are going to give up their life for you and me to be able to sit here, have this conversation. And most of us will never know who they are, what they do. That's a pretty amazing person to do that. Men and women, they're amazing people.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the chance to know a few wounded veterans in my life, and to hear those stories. Some of them won't talk about it. Others, for whatever reason, won't stop talking. About it, which is also interesting to hear those experiences of what those guys went
Absolutely
through.
So I always try to get that out there so people don't think we've got a stolen valor issue where, oh, Bishop says he was in the military. No, Eric Bishop will tell anyone every time I never served. I'm fortunate that I know some people that did serve, and I'm fortunate that they gifted me some pretty amazing things that I cherish. That I mean, those flags, they mean a lot to me to have that piece of history, really. But it's a piece of history for that person's life and what they did. I mean, my buddy would come back and, he wasn't allowed to tell me things, wasn't allowed to show me things. And sometimes I would get to see something that I probably wasn't supposed to see. And I'd be like, is that what I think it is? And he'd be like, shut up, you didn't see that. I'm like, okay. And I would never tell anyone. I've been in places on the military base that you're not allowed to go, but, I might have possibly gone in there and got to see some stuff. Here's one I can say. So another person, it would be a great person maybe you talk to down the line when he gets his deal is this year I've befriended an author named Jack Stewart. So Jack is an up and coming writer, not a young guy like me, which a lot of guys have had multiple careers. Jack served for over 20 years in the Navy, flown, I don't know how many missions, been to overseas during the war. And he's reserve now, Navy pilot. He flies actually for Southwest, but he met me down in New Orleans. We were going down to New Orleans in August for a writing conference. The conference got canceled. He was still flying there. He flies out of Joint Base New Orleans. And he said, if you want to come down, I can get you in a simulator. Because I've been asking him for a long time. I want a back seat. I want to get in the back of the Air Force, in the Navy jet. And he's basically like, Bishop, you're a nobody. It ain't going to happen. I'm like, crap, man. Come on. If you're going to have goals, everyone, any writer out there, if you're going to have goals or whatever your life is, shoot big. Don't have your goal to be to go work at McDonald's. Have your goal to be to walk in the Oval Office, sit at the Resolute desk, which is one of my goals. Because guess what? Maybe you'll achieve it. And if not, you'll keep pushing to try to get it. But he was kind enough to get me on base, and we did a flight simulator. So I got to do, back in August, I got to do an F-18 Hornet flight simulator where it's a full-on, you get in that simulator, all the buttons are real. This is what the pilots use. I'd flown one plane in my life, years ago. I flew a Cessna, but I had never been in a fighter jet, never sat in it. Done some simulators, I guess, like video games, but they were very archaic. And this was the real deal simulator. It was an absolute blast. And I came home and I tell them, some of my buddies, and they're like, dude, who flies in a simulator for an F-18 Hornet? And I'm like, this guy. And I'm blessed to be able to do it. So, I've got to do some cool stuff with some military people. And I have a list of things my buddy that just got out, I told him, I want to skydive. I've never skydived. And I've wanted to for years, and I still haven't. Had kids, had responsibilities, life happens. So I told my buddy several years ago, I want to jump with the Black Knights, who they're like the elites Army jumpers. They're the most famous ones. They're the best ones. He's like, you're a nobody. You're not jumping with the Black Knights. Well, guess what? I still have a goal of I want to jump with the Black Knights. Also, I think probably is a good chance that if I jump with them, it's probably going to be safe. Because George Bush jumped with them, I think, when he was 85 or 90. And they were willing to give up their life for him if his chute didn't open. Of course, he was tandem.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I'm pretty sure if my chute doesn't open, they're going to be like, bye, Bishop. That might be Jack Stewart that said, yeah, don't push. It'll be fun. No, just, so if anyone knows anyone tied to the Black Knights, call me. I'm willing to jump out of a plane with them.
Well,
as long as Jack Stewart does not stuff the parachute, because I don't know, I might, he might try to trick me.
Well, the thing that is you are a published author now.
Now I should be able to do it.
You
Jack
might
also get me in the backseat of a fighter pilot now too, right? I'm gonna have Jack watch this interview. Jack, come on, dude, call the Admiral.
I mean, listen. The one thing my critics always accuse me of is, oh, you're just a clout chaser, and it's like, well, is clout chasing? I mean, for the sake of clout chasing, isn't good. But if you have clout chasing for a purpose, then is it really that bad? So maybe you'll get invited to jump with the Black Knights or something along.
I'll tell you a secret, Sam. I will.
I
will. It'll happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen. And you know how it's not going to happen? Is if I say, that's not going to happen. I'm never going to ask anyone for that. I'm never going to tell anyone I want to do that. Yeah, pretty sure it's not going to happen. So I don't believe I think, therefore I am, and anything you think is going to materialize. No, that's the crazy talk again.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that. But I do think you have I wouldn't say control. I think you can talk yourself out of things. And I think you can create opportunities for yourself by your actions, by your words, by what you do. And some of it I say is joking around. I do have a pretty ambitious list of things I want to do in life.
Sure.
And I'm not checking them off very quickly. And I'm 45 now, and that kind of pisses me off sometimes. But I never wanted to be one of those people that their list of things to accomplish was simplistic, for better words. I want goals, even if I can't achieve those goals. I want to have them out there as that carrot that keeps me getting up every morning and saying, okay, what do I got to do? If I want to get this goal, I have to do this. And yeah, you can talk yourself out of a lot of things in life. And I don't want to be that person that does that.
Yeah. Listen, stranger things have happened to people.
No, I have a letter sitting on my, you can't see it. It's back on the wall over there. I have a letter from President George H.W. Bush, 41st President of the United States. It's a letter, signed letter, a signed picture of him. I've met President Ford one time. I think the body man will probably get me in the White House at some point, maybe. Might let me sit behind the Resolute desk at some point, maybe. That's the goal. That's the thing. But again, why shoot for low? Why shoot for just existing? And I've got to do some really cool things, and I don't plan on stopping doing really cool things. If this ride ends tonight, this is the last thing I get to do, man, I got no complaints either. Because I've got to do, I've got two amazing kids. I've had a life that's a blessed. But I'd like to keep doing it for another 45 years.
Oh yeah. And
why not?
And who knows I have a feeling that this book, could really take off and open, to a whole new series of things. So
hope so.
Are you planning on releasing an audiobook version at all? Or
I'd like to. Yeah. So that's in the publisher's hands. And as of right now, there is not a plan to do it. Probably will depend on how well the book does, honestly. I actually had a successful author text me this morning and say, cool, your book's out there. Where's the audiobook? It's like, so that's unfortunately out of that. That would be the downside, I guess, of not self-published. If I self-published, if I want to spend money, I can do anything I want. But of course you have to have that money to be able to do it. But yeah, no, I would definitely, I know audiobooks are big. One of the authors I talked to said, they get like 20-25% of their sales are in audiobooks.
Yeah, well,
So
I'm a huge audiobook listener, and half jokingly, I was going to ask too. Well, who in your publishing company do I need to call and badger to get an audiobook?
I'll, after this, I'll give you the publisher's information. Tell them. I think that would help if people came out and told the publisher, "Hey, we want an audiobook." If enough people wanted it, it'd probably be a good reason to do it. And we're 2 days into the sales. First thing I told the publisher is, I don't want to know. I don't want to know my sales numbers. And maybe some people want to know, and they're out there looking at Amazon. What are my ranking? I was like, I don't want to know. I'm either going to be really excited or really disappointed. And right now, my job is to try to sell this book, tell about the Body Man, write the other book. I don't want to have numbers screwing with my head. So I think it will sell well, and I think it will be sustained. So I'm not looking for I'm not going to be a bestseller, anything like that. The Body Man's a smaller publisher. I don't have mass distribution in every bookstore and all that. I'm online. I'm on Barnes & Noble. I'm on Amazon. You can buy every version but the audiobook. But I also have realistic expectations. But I also, my goal with it, and again, it's out of my control, is I'm hoping just we start good and we just have a steady rise and steady numbers and keep it going. And I've lined up a couple media things for like January and February. People that were that far backed off say, "Hey, we'd love to have you on, but we're backed up 2 months." I was like, "No, that's cool. I'll be a seasoned pro at this within 2 months." And I'm hoping I'm still selling books. And if things are slowing down in January or February, maybe jumping on your podcast will help jump some numbers. And I'm hoping by then the book's in the hands of the ex-presidents, and one of them has read the book and been like, "Damn, this guy figured it out." And maybe throw some publicity my way. So
Eric Bishop is a terrific author, major bigly. There's no better author in the thriller genre than Eric Bishop, and trust me, I know all the best authors in the thriller game. That is a horrible Trump impression, but I definitely try my best.
I will definitely try to get a book in his hands. I have addresses for most of them. I have a couple maybe inroads with them when I get the hard copies. I'm not going to send them a paperback. I'm going to send each president what they have worked for, a hardback. I have a couple other things to send them. And that, I don't know if they'll ever see it. They might never see the books. And again, I can't control that. I can try to get them in their hands. I talked about Reggie Love earlier. I want to get a copy to Reggie. Just because I'd love to just have a person that was called the Body Man read this book and probably laugh at it, and that's fine. But I'd love them to read it and be like, "Oh, this is pretty clever, good job," or "Oh, this guy knows a little something. What did he figure out?"
But yeah. Be careful. Be careful who you send it to. You don't
careful what you wish for. So
you don't want
you might just get it.
You don't want the director of the CIA to be like, this guy knows a little too.
I've got him in my book. I've got it. I've got him already figured out. I've got him in the next book too. DNI is the big character, the Director of National Intelligence. That one, that's a fun one to write. I've got that actually. The DNI is actually named after someone that means a lot to me. So I use someone's name, and again, like I was saying earlier, that's the fun part.
Cool.
To be able to put some names in that might not mean anything to anybody else, but to me, they're a big deal. So.
Well, if you ever need to base anyone off of like a media personality, I'll give you the rights to use my name. And
well, I will say this because you're gonna put this out here, so I'm gonna be. I haven't put the video out yet. I put it in my newsletter, but I don't think my newsletter gets that much traction. I did a contest that ended on Pub Day or that night. I was trying to get people to buy the advanced copy. And I said, if you buy the advanced copy, you send in proof of purchase. I'm going to run a contest and you can be a character in Breach of Trust. That's the title of the second book. And here's and people do that all the time. That's not a unique contest. But my spin on it and how it is unique is what's different is you can tell me, do you want your character to live or do you want your character to die? If you die, I'll make it good. If you live, you might end up in the third book. So I need to pick the winner. I was going to try to do that tonight, and I'm probably going to get too tired, and I'll just do it tomorrow when I have fresh eyes. But I need to pick the winner for that one. But I got a good turnout, and I've had quite a few people say, well, I didn't, the ebook was, you weren't able to pre-order all the versions just because of some stuff going on, and the ebook was. And I had a lot of people say, I don't want to buy the ebook, but I want to be in your next book. I said, well, you know what? I got to kill people, and I got to have character names, and the book's not far enough along that I'd have to go make a lot of changes. I can do it again. So we're going to start a contest. I got a video I've shot. I need to put it out there maybe tomorrow. We'll do a contest starting with Pub Day, starting with if you bought the book yesterday, that people can send in proof of purchase. I'll give them an email address for that. And if they want to be a character in Breach of Trust, again, this is the second go at it. You get to choose if you live or die. The other contest I'm going to do involves one of these coins, and what I'm going to have everyone do, whoever's interested, and it's going to drag on a little bit because the hardcovers aren't in everyone's hands yet. The paperbacks are getting in the mail. I got mine today. But anyone that buys a copy of the book, whether it's the paperback, the ebook, or the hardcover, starting on Pub Day and going forward until December 15th, if you buy a copy of the book, I want you to take a picture of it. Not like this, because this isn't a very good picture, but I want you to take a picture that's going to make me impressed, that I'm going to really like. You got to be in it, and the book has to be in it. Impress me. Do something cool. You do that, I will send you a hardcover signed personalized book, and I'll send you one of these. There's not very many of these made. I'll send you a personal challenge coin. I'd love to see what people come up with. And again, not necessarily other authors have done that. And they've gotten some really cool response. And it's just cool. I got right before I came on tonight, Dr. Jason Piccolo, who I was on his podcast. Jason does The Protectors, great podcast. Great guy. Someone that's served, someone that's been in the military, and someone that's really put their life on the line, and been one of those people that I really respect a lot, and that really supports law enforcement. He bleeds law enforcement. He posted a picture with his book. He got his book today, and he posted a picture, and I've jumped on. I'm sure there's messages since then. I haven't looked at Twitter in hours. Keep sending those pictures. I want to see people with a copy of their book, and it's just cool. For someone that wrote the book, to see it in someone's hands, to hear someone like yourself and other people that have been starting to read it. I've heard from several people that finished it yesterday, and they're like, they loved it, and they had cool things to say about it. I did my job then. If the book resonates and if people want a second book, then I did what I set out to do. I created a clever narrative that is resonating with people. I do want people to think about things. Is there, when it comes to the body man, do you want someone, not even is there someone there? We'll just work off the premise that there's someone in the White House with a lot of power that I've described. Do you want someone in the White House with that much power? Do you want someone that will step in and prevent the president from doing something or clean something up the president did? And, I had to figure out, and I had to learn, what was the backstory of the body man? When did it start? I know exactly the moment it started. That's actually the first chapter in the third book, actually, which is the only chapter in the third book I've written, is the start of this whole body man era. And the cool thing about the concept too is, because the body man is not just one person, because that person's there's time ends and another person steps in, I can do some interesting stories with it being different characters. I've already got the next body man picked out and developed in written form and in my head. So that's pretty cool. It's fun to play on this. I don't know how long I'll do this. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm a huge Vince Flynn fan. Kyle Mills, when Vince died, I think a lot of people were extremely sad, and myself one of them, because every year when that book came out, I would devour that thing in a day. Oh man, I loved reading his books. And when he passed on, that sucked. It sucked, of course, for his family, but it sucked for the readers and the fans. And when Kyle stepped in, I was kind of like, goodness, I wonder how this is going to go. And, Kyle's, besides being a stand-up guy, he is a phenomenal writer. And, but that series has gone on a long time, and man, do I want to write a series that long? And I'm not saying that I would be able to, that I'd have that opportunity, but if I had that opportunity, do I want to write 20 books of the same character? And I don't know. I honestly don't know if I'd want to. I like the freshness. I like the fact that the body man changes out. I got a different person, because they're all so very different. Even though they have to follow a certain criteria, they're all very different individuals. And, and this is not a plot point, but just, off the cuff, what if you get a body man in there that isn't exactly who they seem? What if you got someone there with that much power that, they can do something with it that might not be good for the country? Again, there's a million things. I don't know if Chris Haughey, Deep State. That's a book that I was able to get an advance copy. Chris did, and I know I've talked to Chris. I did a podcast with him a while ago, and then we've had just interactions. And it's someone that's achieved success at a later stage in life. Chris isn't 30 years old. He's been a screenwriter for a long time, and just came out with this book that just bowled people over. And the things he did in that book weren't what most people did. And, I think we were talking about it earlier. We might not have been, but talk about characters. What a neat thing that Chris did in his books, and especially in Deep State, first time he did it, is you have a lot of you need minor characters. Someone goes somewhere, they're going to interact with someone. And that person comes on for a page, a chapter, a paragraph, and they're gone. Well, what Chris really did, if you've read that or if you recall, is for some of those minor characters, he'd kind of give you and after that moment, this is what happened to them. They went on to do this. They died in a fiery car wreck. I don't remember all the details of what he did with his characters, but he kind of gave you a glimpse, forlorning of what's going to occur in the future for them, which was a really cool thing to do. And I always love seeing someone take a genre I think I know and then give it a little twist. Oh, they're doing that now. And it keeps it fresh. And I'm hoping that's what The Body Man does. I hope it's a fresh take on a political thriller, because I don't want it to be stale. I don't want people to know what's going on after 3 chapters. I want people to, when some of the reveals happen, to be like, I didn't see that coming.
I do have an idea for a potential plot, maybe down the line, if you're interested. I'm not sure if it's something that.
Are you looking for royalties here or something, Sam? What's going on?
No, I've got my own. I've got my own books. I've got my own novella series for that. But there's a whole
ideas where it could be taken.
There's a whole bunch of that's the fun thing about writing these is and the other thing with the Body Man and kind of the idea of having multiple people. I know this isn't exactly the same thing, but as you're talking about the different personalities, that reminded me a bit of what they've done with James Bond over the past.
Oh yeah, James Bond's done some pretty dramatic changes, really. So
yeah, including the fact that but by now I'm pretty sure everyone knows that is
this the new movie?
Yeah,
Don't say it. I haven't seen it. Ruin it for me, Sam.
I have a 2-hour spoiler-filled podcast.
I'm not watching that one, Sam. I'm not listening to that one. I haven't seen it yet. I was gonna go to the theater, and then I saw how long it was. I'm getting old. I've fallen. I fell asleep during Deadpool 2. How old am I that Deadpool? Now, I was with guys from Fifth Group, and it was a theater outside of Fort Campbell. It was hot. The air conditioner broke. So we're in this theater, and it's like 82 degrees, and I'm old. So, the guy next to me is 29. He's fine. I lay down, and I'm sitting there in the theater, and all I know is I open my eyes, and I'm like, what did I miss? I didn't know how long I slept through. My buddy next to me, I look at him. He's just straight on watching the movie, and I'm kind of like, what do you want? He didn't. I don't know if he even realized us. I wasn't snoring at the time, I guess. So I went back and saw Deadpool like a couple weeks later, back when I went home with another buddy, And I was like, and I kind of nudged him. I was like, I fell asleep during this. I got to see how much I missed. What did I miss? So I get to the part where I don't remember anymore. I nudge him. I was like, okay, I fell asleep at this point. I don't remember this part. I watched for 45 minutes, Sam. And then finally I remembered that next part. I'm like, holy crap, I slept through half the movie. So yeah, 3-hour movies. I think No Time to Die is 3 hours. That's going to be an online watching that I can maybe watch it twice, because if I start that too late, I'm not gonna stay awake.
It doesn't feel like two and a it doesn't feel like two and a half.
Okay.
The other thing too is they just released it on rental. So if you have like Amazon or iTunes or something,
Okay.
you can rent it now.
Okay. I might have to catch it at some point then on rental. So
I mean, have you seen Craig's Bond before? I'm assuming
I've seen all the other ones besides this one, yes. And I've gone to the theater to see the last couple. I think I know I have at least 2 or 3 over there in the movie case. So I've seen him. I think he's, I mean, I don't know. I don't get into the ranking ones for those. I know which ones I don't kind of like. But I think Craig's done it. I think he kind of revitalized the franchise, honestly.
Yeah. Craig is the one who actually got me interested in reading the original Ian Fleming novels.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which you want to talk about thrillers. I mean, those books are like, 50, 60, they came out in the late 50s and early 60s, a lot of them. They minus some of the racial language and terminology that they used back then, they still hold up as
absolutely
as good story.
Well, and I think a good story will hold up. Now there's technology things, 40 years ago there wasn't cell phones. Books now have cell phones. Well, that's the way we communicate. You can't skirt that now and say, and he ran off to his office and picked up his rotary phone. No, the fact is that we all have phones in our pockets that can pretty much do anything we want, turn our lights on, start our car. I mean, whatever you think of, you pretty much have an app for now. So they get dated because of that. But a good story transcends the dates.
Yeah.
A good story will hold up 50 years later. I mean, I mentioned earlier when we talked that the first thing I started doing was writing poetry. Why did I write poetry? Because I liked William Shakespeare. I have his leather-bound complete works at the bottom of my shelf. William Shakespeare was a long, long, long time ago. And it's Old English. It's hard to read. But what William Shakespeare told has held up for hundreds of years. Well, that's a true storyteller that can tell a story that transcends their lifespan.
Yeah. Well, and even like the great American authors, and I mean, I would consider Clancy to be one of those, certainly. And I don't want to give him a big head, but I think Jack Carr could be on his way to becoming one of those great American authors, certainly of the post 9/11.
Sure. No, I can completely resonate with that. That statement resonates absolutely.
And so. I think based on what I know, he would kind of be like, oh shucks, and because he seems kind of,
he's pretty humble guy. Pretty humble guy. Yeah.
But
doesn't have a big head. Well, if he does, he hides it very, very well, but he doesn't have a big head, trust me.
Well, and I mean, that's the other distinct thing from my perspective too, is like reading political thrillers like from the Cold War, like the John le Carre books and whatnot, and then reading the post. I mean, I was born in the mid 90s, so I sort of remember. I was born in 95.
Son. Should I say yes, son? You're a little younger than me.
I was born in 95, so I kind of remember. I remember a little bit of what the world was like pre 9/11, and then I definitely remember the world before smartphones. But now there's a whole generation of kids that doesn't even remember the internet pre Facebook, And I'm
You
kind of
know,
like,
there's a whole generation that doesn't even recall. I mean, there's a generation that doesn't know what 9/11 is now. You'd say 9/11, they're like, what do you mean 9/11? Like 9/11, 2001, 9/11. They're like, what? I mean, I've met people that have said that, kids, young people, not 5-year-olds either. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, clearly I graduated high school in 94. So I remember life before 9/11. I traveled a lot before 9/11. I was in Europe before 9/11. Yeah, the world has changed dramatically just in my lifespan, especially from a technology standpoint. From technology, my kids sometimes will mention something about cell phones, and they don't have cell phones. My daughter will mention, oh, she mentioned it last night. Daddy, when I turn 16, you're gonna buy a cell phone. I'm like, you can buy your own cell phone. What? And I said, I bought my own cell phone. I was 18 or 19. I have to think about it. It was this old bulky Verizon phone that I used and I had to pay for minutes, and you only had 80 minutes or 100 minutes and you couldn't text. I think you could text, but it was like click, click, click. But yeah, it's and well, I'll be driving, Dad. I need to, what if I break down? I don't know. I got 6 years. I'll think about that. I'll think about what we're gonna do. I'm just, of course I also tell her, well, you're gonna live with Dad till you're 35. Yeah, no, I'll drive you wherever you gotta go, and I'll drive you back home. And this is a bad world and there's bad people out there. And
yeah,
I don't want to have to go to federal prison at some point because someone decided to mess with you, and I don't trust
yeah,
the
and by the way, Dad's not afraid to go to jail either. So
Dad has a shovel, a roll of duct tape, and no conscience. You're
well,
covered.
one
You're covered.
and Dad's nickname is the Body Man too. That ought to, well, no.
So let's keep that straight. I am not the Body Man. I know the Body Man. The Body Man happens to tell me his stories, and I put him out there for people, but I am not the Body Man. However, I know the Body Man, and I know some pretty badasses.
Oh yeah, I know.
I can make
Yeah.
some phone calls.
Oh yeah. So, all right, sir. Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on. And
Thank you for having me, Sam. I
where
enjoyed our talk.
where can people find you at,
Great question.
and
Us-
where can people get this book?
So probably the easiest way, and I do want to support local. So we're not spread out just with a smaller publisher. I don't know what local stores I will or will not be in. If you can get it from your local bookstore and go down there and ask them to order it, I would encourage you to do that. I'm going to be working with a local bookstore for signed copies here close to my house. From what most people do, and I mean, I ordered a book from them, is Amazon's probably the easiest. If you go to Amazon search bar, type in The Body Man, Eric Bishop. The Body Man, Eric Bishop will pull up my book first. You can get the ebook, paperback, hardback. They'll be at your house pretty darn soon. And Barnes & Noble has it as well. They have the hardback and the paperback on Barnes & Noble's website. I checked that actually a few hours ago, make sure that all looked good. And there'll be other locations. Probably if you go to Google and type in The Body Man, Eric Bishop, it'll probably go to shopping, and other bookstores will have it. And then I also have a website. It's my name, ericpbishop.com. P stands for Paul. Just think of the Beatles. So ericpbishop.com. I don't keep it updated with everything, but it has links to everything. It has links to blog entries I've done. It has links to the books, the book being sold, and where to go get copies of it. Tells a little bit about me. Tells a little bit about my adventure, where I've been. I've got a page that kind of helps show some pictures and some of the places I've been fortunate to travel. I'm on Twitter. Twitter is my most common. I'm at EPB author, my initials, EPB author. On Facebook, Eric P. Bishop author on Facebook. Instagram, same thing, EPB author for Instagram. I'm on Twitter the most. If people want to connect with me, follow me. I'll follow you back. Yeah, you can direct message me from Twitter. Facebook, I'll probably get in touch with you, but I haven't checked Facebook in a couple of days, and I know there's a lot of messages. It's just I hadn't got to it. I was going to try to get to it tonight. I might get to it on Saturday at the rate I'm going. Instagram, I don't have a huge following, so I'm definitely on Instagram, but it's an easy fix. I can go there in a couple minutes and like a few things and reply. So,
well, yeah, well, for me, what's interesting is, whoop, did we lose you? Okay, I think we lost Eric. So anyway, folks, I guess that will do it then. Hold on, I might be getting a message. Yeah, his computer just died. Well, at any rate, then I think that'll do it for Eric P. Bishop. So Eric, if you're listening to this, thank you for coming on. And yeah, folks, you can check out his books on Amazon or wherever you get your books. And I want to thank him for coming on. And folks, I will see you tomorrow on the Whitfield Report for the Saturday show. Until then, take care. God bless. God save this great nation. God, freedom, legacy in that order. And I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to The Whitfield Report on the NGC Network. Please visit Sam's website at www.thesamwhitfield.com and support Sam on Patreon at patreon.com/Whitfield Report. Until next time, God bless, God save this great nation, and God, freedom, legacy in that order.